You're listening to the Hella Well with Danielle show, a podcast taking women of color on a journey exploring all things wellness and travel related. We're all about showing you how to put on your oxygen mask first and creating lasting self-care habits that will free you to travel the world and live the life you truly desire, and not one you have to fake loving. I'm your host, Danielle Washington. Now let's buckle up and start this journey. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Hello Well with Danielle podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Washington, and today my guest is Denise Taylor. She is the author of Embrace Your Power and Go. And if you think about it, we all want to embrace our power. We all have this power that's within us, whether we realize it or not. And oftentimes we don't realize it. But even if we do realize it, we're like, okay, I have this power and I know what I want to do, but I'm not really sure how to go. I'm not really sure how to shake off fear. I'm not sure exactly how to do the work and to be able to be consistent in it, to be able to really shine. And so I wanted to bring her on here. She is amazing. She has 25 years of, working successful business, marriage and all these different things. And all these combined experiences that she has helped her really position her to help other women develop successful strategies for everyday life. But don't get it twisted. And life has not been easy for her. She's had to overcome trauma, losses, disappointment. But through that and through those experiences, she has been able to write this amazing book to help you embrace your own power and go. So make sure to take some notes and make sure to buy the book, y'all. We want to support other Black businesses, but we also want to know how to really embrace our powers that have been there with us all this time and truly go. Hey, Denise Taylor, thank you for being on the Hello Well with Danielle podcast. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful and very, very excited to be here with you.
I love it. I am super excited that you're here, not only because you were one of my, P2P sisters, and I love, having, this community that Patrice Washington's community created on the podcast, but you have just written this most amazing book called Embrace Your Power and Go. And there's so many people who want to embrace their power, but just don't know the go part. Like the embrace part is like, duh, but the go part. And thank you. I got an advanced copy of the book. And so I read it, loved it. And I see how it can be truly transformational for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
But I know in the book, you talk about your story and I wanted to get into this, how you went from not having a purpose, not feeling like you were going somewhere to, creating this power. And I just want to know, what was that moment of shift from going to I'm not motivated, I'm motivated and I'm gonna get this success and I'm worthy of it?
I believe we all have defining moments. They to me are moments of reckoning, right? Where you're changed or challenged to show up, to be more, to do more, have more, achieve more. And it's in those moments that your whole life can pivot. And I think that the pivot continues through successive moments, but there is one true defining moment that kind of helped to turn things around. And for me, it goes back so many years ago. And as I started on the reflections of how did I get to where I was and what kind of things happened along the way, it took me back to the moment of when it was time for me to go to school, because my life significantly shifted in terms of focus, determination, a zeal for success and results once I was able to go away to college. And so for me, it was a bit of a defining moment that was more than just that rite of passage, right? So many of us look at college as this rite of passage to becoming an adult. But for me, it was a new lease on life, a new lease on understanding what I was capable of achieving in ways that up until that point, I just wasn't really focused on doing. So for me, it was that shift. And I share a little bit of that in the introduction of the book.
And what I love about kind of what you were doing or how you were going about to do it, but I think that so many people want to get this shift and start creating this shift and start trying to start embracing the power. But what made you continue to push past that old narrative of I'm not good or I shouldn't do this because, like, my family wasn't going to college. Why, I didn't have this role model. So what made you push past the old narrative that this isn't for me to even begin your shift?
Yeah, I think we all within us have this innate desire to see ourselves at our better version or even our best self, right? And once I got a taste of one acceptance, that was so huge. The thought that the university had even accepted me just
Mhm,
gave me a term to describe myself that I never had a sense of up until that point. When you are coming out of trauma and when you are coming out of experiences that really question your worthiness, when you get something that says, hey, you're accepted, you want to give it a try. Whatever it is, you want to give it a try, whether it's a new position. That's why we all get really excited when we get a chance to get a new job, or we get a chance to join a new organization, or we get a chance to be a part of something that we believe is better or going to give us more visibility or insight. And for me, it was the sense of acceptedness that kind of had an appeal. The second is um, I just had I I was never without capability. I was never without the skill set, the ability to connect the dots, the ability to really step up to the challenge, if you will. I was never without that. I just never had something set before me that made me think I could or had
mhm,
an interest in me doing so. And I think once I got a chance to go away to school and there was the right framework around me to support and kind of point me and urge me in that way. So let me just back up a little bit and tell a little bit of the story so that what I just said makes sense. Growing up, we went to school. That wasn't the question, but there wasn't a whole lot of expectation, right? I didn't
mhm,
grow up in a household where there was an expectation of performance, there was an expectation of grades, there was an expectation of all these different things. I grew up in a household where going to school was the expectation. What you did once you got there, really wasn't monitored, it wasn't really pushed, homework wasn't checked, attendance wasn't checked, like all of these different checks and balances that kind of undergird your ability to rise and meet the challenge just wasn't there for me. And so there was this loose expectation that you would go, but there wasn't any diligence or accountability built into it. And that was
yeah,
one of the frameworks that changed, that allowed my mindset to shift and gave me a carrot, if you will, dangling there for me to be lured to, was being accepted in that program where there was an expectation, there
mhm,
was a goal, there was this vote of confidence that, hey, we believe in you, we want to give you a shot, we believe you can do it. And it created, or it ignited, that innate desire in all of us, I believe, that we want to try, right? We have a desire to
mhm.
try, but without the right motivations, without the right inspiration or even encouragement, we can easily rest on our laurels, especially if we think it's okay. We can just chill out, we can relax back and not really press ourselves to go for it. And so I think for me, it was just expectation, accountability, and support that made a difference. And it was so different than anything I had experienced up until that time.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because I think it talks to what many of us go through and may not even realize. And I always talk about it is the it is what it is mentality. It's like it's just the way it is.
Mhm.
My mama did this, my brother did this, so it is what it is. Like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to go to school, but no one says I have to be accountable because no one else said it is. It's just, I'm just getting by, and it's that just getting by mentality. And I love that you had that spark, and college was that spark for you to, do better and to want more for yourself. For me, it's interesting because, like, I grew up watching The Cosby Show. I think we're around the same age because I read the book and I'm like,
Mhm.
Bewitched. I'm like, okay, we're around the same age. I love some Bewitched. Uh, but I watched The Cosby Show. But even before then, I knew I wanted to go to college like by middle school. And my brother is 5 years older than me, and I'm looking at colleges before he's looking. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, why aren't you looking at colleges? I didn't put the ideal that I couldn't go to anything because I'm like, oh, I can go to everything. What was interesting is I had high school advisors like, oh no, sweetie, college isn't meant for you. You should look into home economics. Mind you, my grade point average was 3.6 when I graduated. But still, they were like, oh no, you should look into, home economics. You should think about other things besides college. And I saw hindsight 2020. I noticed they did that to a lot of African American students because I went to a mixed school. And yeah, that's the wow part of my world. But if I didn't have that mindset that I'm going, I would have been in the it is what it is. Not meant to go to college. And so I feel
Mhm.
like there's so many people
Mhm.
who go through that. In the book, you talk about there's a critical principles to success. And I love the name. So you call it the success superpowers. Why the name and what
Mhm.
is it?
So I call it the success superpowers because I think we have these innate gifts that we've been blessed with, right? But I also believe that if we will allow God to like infuse in them, they can become supernatural. And I think
Mhm.
the difference is when you go at things in your own strength, in your own will, in your own ability, you're going to have a measure of success, right? But when you allow yourself to be divinely led, when you allow yourself to tap into the power that God has given to us all, I believe it becomes supernatural. And that's when some of the things that we experience in life, which are the unexplained things, just occur. We refer to them sometimes as coincidences, or they just happen to, or it just happened to have all those things that kind of show up. I believe God orchestrates for us. And so I call them supernatural because, sorry, the superpowers, because I believe that we are all naturally gifted. We all have the ability to do it. But I think when we plug in to the power source, it's almost like they get a rocket boost. They get
Mhm.
ignited in a way that can propel us so much further. Now, for me, I will tell you, walking through life, I didn't recognize them as much as I did reflecting back on life. So I don't want to paint a picture like, oh, I went to college and boom, girl,
Girl, I
I had
had
these
it.
powers down. I had these
Right.
powers down and was working it out. That's not the picture at all.
They didn't give you a
But
cape in
what
college? I'm so confused.
no, no, no capes, no capes, no capes. But they began to manifest themselves or appear to me as I reflected back and said to myself, like, how did all this happen? Like, what are some things that you begin to apply to situations that have made a difference in you getting to where you are? And I saw those 5 core themes kind of ring out, and I can walk through them if you want to. I don't know if you want to step through them or if you want me to walk through them.
Yeah, we
But
can walk through them.
okay.
Definitely. One thing I did want to mention, because I know that there's some people who may not believe in God or may
Mhm.
practice another religion. And so I want to invite people to, replace the word. It could be creator, it can be higher power, it could be universe, it could be Mama Aya, it could be Mother Earth. Just to know that for Denise, it's God, but it can be something else for you. And I just want to invite people to that knowledge. It's just a higher
Yeah.
power.
Yeah. Here's what I would say. You know what energizes you, right? And you know where you tap into something that gives you the the resounding strength to go. So to your point, Danielle, yeah, you name it for you. I'm gonna
Mhm.
name it for me. So I in my statements am not passing any kind of judgment on anybody. Everybody speaks from their own experiences. But what I would say is take the principle of the thing and then figure out how you can apply it to your life.
Yeah.
So very simply put, success superpower number one is see yourself successful. It's just that simple. I believe that we have to visit our future selves on the canvas of our imagination. We have to go there.
Yeah.
We have heard in our lifetime, believe it, and you can achieve it. We've heard in our lifetime, dream it and it can be yours. We've heard all of these different things in our lifetime. So essentially, what I am saying is in alignment with that, which is we have to begin to think bigger broader, more expansive than what we potentially may be experiencing in our everyday. We have got to stretch ourselves and allow ourselves to outthink, outpush, outrun anything within our normal circumstances so that we can find something to reach for that seems bigger than who we are. So, success superpower number one, it's all about daydreaming. It's all about dreaming of what it is that you want to achieve and making sure that it's big enough so that whatever power you rely on can get in that thing and be a part of the journey. Because what I have found is when we see how big it can be, we immediately shrink it down to what we feel we can accomplish within ourselves, right? We
Yeah.
we don't leave it big. And in order for your power source, whoever you subscribe to, for me it's God, in order for your power source to have room to get in there and help you achieve the bigger thing, you have to leave it big.
Yeah, and I love that you talked about dreaming being so important. What are some ways that you found that were helpful or creative to dream? Because some people may not be like, okay, is she talking about my dreams in my sleep? Like, how do I do this?
Yeah, one of the things that I found to be the most impactful is exposure. And a lot of times we go to the same restaurants, we eat the same foods, we don't challenge ourselves to be exposed out of our
Mhm.
norm. So, the biggest thing that has allowed me, which is the same thing that happened to me when I went to college, is I saw that the world was bigger than what I knew. That was my immediate reaction when I got to college campus. See, I was used to growing up in an urban environment, you know, there was probably maybe a 60 block radius, and that was about all we did. We drove up and down this one street that went north to south, and then we turned left and went to down the one that went east to west. That just kind of was what it was. And when I was lifted out of the environment that I was in and I was placed in a different environment, that was when I realized that the world was bigger than what I knew. And so for me, exposure is the biggest thing.
Okay.
I think one of the ways that we have seen it done over time, I know you mentioned Cosby Show and you mentioned those things, was visiting neighborhoods that you don't typically live in, driving through them so that you could begin to see environments and homes that are atypical of yours. Another
Yeah.
one is going to the shopping mall on the other side of town so that you can see what it's like to be in a different environment. Now, those are very simplistic ways, but the biggest thing is exposure. You can get there by reading a magazine that you normally don't read. If you
Mhm.
normally don't read Discovery magazines or you normally don't watch Discovery channels, the question is, what are you doing to expose yourself to more, especially as it relates to where your passions and your interests lie?
I think that's great. And I never thought about the exposure part, but I think it's so key. And I look back at my journey, I'm like, yeah, I was exposed to different things. And like for me, I moved to Italy when I was 29, and that wasn't something I
Mhm.
was necessarily exposed to per se at first because, no one in my family or no one I really knew just did that. It was just like, what are you doing? But my parents took us to our first trip to Europe when I was 14. But then I did have two friends who, when I was later on exposed to me, they actually moved away. And I was just like, wait, I could totally do this. And it was that exposure when I saw my friends do it, and that also the exposure my parents took me to Europe and like, this could be my life. This could be my dreams. And so, but I love your number two is shake off the fear. Fear
Mhm.
kills me constantly. And so, like, I
Mhm.
know, we shouldn't be in fear and all these different things. And, we should find a way to move past it. But, like, what advice do you give people how to move despite fear? Because fear is going to be there, but
Yeah.
how do you move despite fear?
So there's a couple of exercises. So you're right. Number two is shake off fear. And it sets in immediately when we really allow ourselves. It's so immediate that we don't realize it's occurring. So when we allow ourselves to get big with whatever we envision, we begin to slice that thing down right away with questions around feasibility, comfort, value. Am I worth it? Can it happen? We begin to analyze the heck out of it. And before we know it, we're back down to whatever it is we're doing today, right? Because we
Mhm.
shape it down. What I would challenge is what I said before, which is leave it big so that the super can kick in, right? So that's the first thing. Leave it big so there's room for the super to kick in. The way that you reckon with fear, I love the acronym that fear stands for false evidence appearing real. It's not real. Okay. So I love that acronym. But you
Mhm.
have to begin to train yourself to think on things that are feasible and capable based on truth. What is true? You are well able. What is true? You have been blessed with all number of capabilities, gifts, talents, and strengths. What is true? You have a you have an interest in you to see you succeed and not to fail. Like there are so many elements that are true that you have to begin to rinse those thoughts that you start to happen. And what I would say to you is you need to make sure that those things that come at those defeating thoughts or those limiting beliefs are readily available. Like, so it has to be such a practice that you create for yourself because you're in the war of your mind at that point, right? When reasoning is occurring, you're in the war of your mind. And if you're not prepared to wage war against the thoughts that are coming into your head to strike as fear, then they're going to overwhelm you and they are going to paralyze you, which means that if I need to take out a piece of paper and I need to have a list of the things that I need to say are good and true about me, then I need them to be readily available so that I can war against the thoughts that are coming in my mind. The other thing is, and this is something that you and I know to be a practice, which is keep your achievements and successes handy, right? Review them on a regular basis so that you can constantly be reminded of what you've been able to achieve and accomplish. I know if you're anything like me, I do it and I'm off to the next thing, but I really don't stick around long enough to celebrate the moment, to celebrate the accomplishment, to celebrate that thing that I have been able to successfully achieve. And so if you start keeping things like brag binders or reminders of what you've been able to accomplish, and you intentionally go back and review it, whether it's
Yeah.
on the first of every month, I'm going to take a chance to go back. It's playing it back because you need to know you were a part of that win. You were able to bring that thing to pass. You were able to help accomplish it. That's another thing that wars at fear. And then finally, the last thing that wars out fear is really, what do you do to stay connected to your power source, right? What are
Yeah.
you doing to make sure that you understand what is thought about you from your creator, what is thought about you from the one that you're relying on to help energize you? Because that truth has to be something that you embrace. Now, I know for myself, I have trauma in my past, right? And so I have to wrestle with this thing all the time. Anytime
Mhm.
you're coming out of trauma, you have experiences that make you already feel less than. They already attack every part of you. And so it's so important to make sure you're warring against that with those things that help you to understand your value.
Well, what's interesting is there's a lot of trauma that's ancestral that most of us don't even know is there, or there's trauma that was
Mhm.
passed down from our parents that we aren't even recognizing. So we don't even realize that we're at war in the mind because it's just, it is what it is. This isn't trauma because this is just the way life is. And so I encourage people to be more aware of where they are, to even be able to start tapping into themselves to figure out, I am here. This is where I'm trying to go. And this is what's holding me back. And I'm curious for you, like you talk about in the book, that what was it you said, in order for these principles to work, I had to see myself. What are things you
Mhm.
did to help you see that this is where I am? Like that, I put it like it's like that little point in the mall. You are here. So how
Mhm.
did you do figure out
Mhm.
you are here? Where do you like? How did you get here? And how did you figure out this is where I want to go?
Hmm. I think I probably figured out that this is where I want to go before I really figured out this is where I am, right? That
And I
this
think a
is
lot of
where
people
I
do
want
that.
to go. I'm sorry.
I said I think a lot of people are in that boat. They know where they want to go, but
Mhm.
they haven't figured out that they're here and what got them here. I think that's very common.
Yeah, yeah. What started me on the journey, because I'll be very, very honest with you, I had a lot of success, right? There there are things, especially when you have a lot of talents and gifts, that you can just show up and do, and you can do them quite easily, and they're without any degree of effort. You just are gifted to do it. But just because I had success doesn't mean I was without struggle. And so
Yeah.
I had a lot of success. I kind of knew where I wanted to go. And what I didn't realize at the time is that the success that would be most appetizing to me had nothing to do with performance. It had everything to do with me emerging. And so
Right.
once I was able to get to the point that I discovered fulfillment in a way I never had before, that's when I had my next defining moment. And so I was home, and I will tell you, I was home, I was on medical leave, I was home for 8 weeks. And I'm not a real big television watcher. And my husband was working long hours, and we are empty nesters. And so I was home in quiet. I was home in still. And it was as if I was going through this process. And again, for me, it's God, but it was as if I was going through this process where I was beginning to be tapped into something that was different than what I experienced before. And I knew at that point, in order for me to head down the path to show up like I do now, to find fulfillment in serving and helping others, I was going to have to deal with my secret pains. I was going to have to deal with the things that were inside of me that I was tethered to, that didn't show itself when it was just about performance success, right? Because
Mhm.
I can get up and I can do the work, I can get up and I can perform. But within me, my appetite was changing, and I wanted more, and I wanted more freedom from what had me bound to the past. And so I'm saying to you, I knew that that's what I wanted, but there was a long journey ahead. And what was involved in that journey was first being willing to confront it, right? Being willing to deal with it, being willing to say, this is what happened, being willing to say to myself, you were molested as a child, being willing to say to myself, you were sexually assaulted as a teen, being willing to say to myself, because those were my blues. Right. I ain't tell people about
Mhm.
that stuff. That's the stuff I talked about in the shower when I was by myself, or when I was driving in the car by myself, or I'm laying in the bed. I nursed my blues. But on the
Yeah.
outside, I had the appearance of just success after success. So when you ask me what changed, is I really had to deal with my stuff. I really had to loose myself from being tethered to the past and being I guess it's almost like this. I was always afraid somebody would find out the truth about me, right? Would find
Mhm.
out what really happened. And I was always afraid that I would hit some mark where someone would show up and they would talk about some dirt I did, some mistake I made, some tragic decision that I did in the past that I just was trying to keep hush, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, it was really beginning by telling that story and being freed from that pain that set me on a course to say, you know what, now I can resolve to go and deal with it. But that meant therapy. That meant, being willing to confront the pain. That meant all of these different things was truly what took me to shift and go. Now, for other people, it may be different because not everybody has the aptitude or capabilities around performance, right? Some people are just trying to show up for performance, but I had that one.
Yeah.
What needed to evolve more was what was within, and I
But I
had
think that's
to
for
face myself.
everyone. I think everyone has,
It
whether
could
that's
be.
they have this performance thing, whatever, there is not a single person on this world that does not have something within them that they need to embrace. And I think that's a huge part of what your book talks about, because I feel like we are born complete. But then
Mhm.
we are given as children by our parents, by, our schools, by society, all these different colored glasses that filter that we are great. Whether you believe it's
Mhm.
God that made us great, great and complete, universe, whatever, but we are already born complete. We're socialized to forget that. And so I think
Mhm.
part of our journey to getting to our authentic self and embracing our power and to be able to go is to figure out how to take off those glasses. And
Mhm.
I love how you were able to get free from things that it's not easy. As a person who has been where you are and many of
Mhm.
those same stories, it
Mhm.
is not an easy journey. It doesn't have to necessarily be difficult, but it's not always easy.
Mhm.
But it's something that you have to be willing to get out of the comfort zone,
Mhm.
i.e., fear. Fear is comfort.
Mhm.
Because your comfort zone, it feels real comfy. It's the devil I know. I'm gonna stay here because
Mhm.
it's the devil I know, even though it's stopping me from where I really want to be. So I commend you for that and doing the work
Mhm.
because that's what it is. Like you're literally talking about doing the work. For me, Reiki has been such a huge part of my work. Like I was already been doing the work, but through Reiki, which is, Japanese form of stress reduction and release, and really helps you balance the mind, body, and soul,
Mhm.
I've been able to get clarity to
Mhm.
be like, oh, yeah, that behavior over here, that's the socialized self. That's not in alignment with
Mhm.
who I am as a complete person. And once I kind of started feeling that, oh wait, I am complete and I've been awakening to it, like things have just been shifting and I have been embracing my power and
Yes.
working on going, but it's doing the
I love
work.
that. I love that because I think once we have that realization, right? And it's so funny that you said doing the work because that's the next one, right?
Mhm.
Um once we have that realization, it is the most freeing experience that you can have. Like I really thought that I was in a good place 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but all
Mhm.
of that pales in comparison to where I believe I am now and what I believe is important to me, right?
Yeah.
We could get duped into thinking a whole lot of things are important, but when you go on a journey of truly embracing your power and following whatever you've been divinely inspired to be, do, have, or achieve, whatever that is that you're being nudged to accomplish and do, and you show up authentically to do it, there is nothing that stands in the way of that. There is a sense of being unstoppable that comes
Mhm.
over you that I'm telling you, Danielle, if I would have had this at 25,
Girl,
my
we would be
life
running we'd be president. You be president, I could be vice president. We'd be running the world.
yes, I would be in a completely different place because fear makes you succumb and submit yourself to things that are not always in your best interest, whether it's
Mhm.
relationships, whether it's jobs, whether it's accountabilities or roles. It just throws you into something that isn't necessarily in your best interest because you find yourself wanting to people please and you find yourself wanting to walk in these lanes that may be of no interest to you, right?
Yeah.
And so I just I want to encourage people to really go after it. Now, I will tell you that this book is for the person in the starting blocks. Like that you're clear. I'm supposed to be doing this, whatever it is, but you find yourself just a little hesitant to go. This
Mhm.
book is written to help empower you to go, right? So it's not so much, though there's aspects of it that will help with clarity. It's not so much a journey of clarity. It's a
Mhm.
journey of execution. It's a journey of truly how do I take those forward steps and do number 3, which is do the work, right? You
Yeah.
gotta begin to put your hand to the plow. You gotta begin to execute. You gotta begin to bless. And whether you believe in God or not, You believe in something that you think comes in and intercedes and helps bless, which means that you need to give them something to bless, right?
Yeah,
If you're not
definitely.
doing anything, there is nothing for them to empower or bless. And so, for myself, I believe that God is going to bless the work of my hands, which means I need to get busy. And so, number three is do the work.
Yeah, and I love that you talk about doing the work and we need to do the work. But, in doing that work, you mentioned in the book, which I feel like we so all do, is we get in that zone, that zone of I'm driven, I'm working, I'm doing my thing. And I think what stopped me oftentimes from actually doing the work, the real work, was because I was in that zone because it felt good. It felt like this natural high. But you talk about the reality of that is, that drive is heavy and that we're often aren't aware of the weight. So the fourth
Mhm.
one of your fourth principle is to take care of me. What do you
Mhm.
do when you are driven to like help you push the off button? Like what are the ways that works for you to kind of push that off button and take care of you?
It's so funny that you keyed in onto that because pushing the off button is a hard one for me. So, one of my trauma responses is to keep myself busy.
Mhm.
And I find myself gravitating to do work to just keep myself busy, to keep myself going. And so, one of the things that I have to be very intentional about doing is identifying other things I enjoy and finding ways to remove myself from environments where work can be done. Because, like
Yeah.
I mentioned before, I'm not a huge TV watcher, which means if I'm just sitting at home, I'm going to easily gravitate to work as opposed to just chill out, right? And
Yeah.
so I have to be intentional about keeping things, front of mind to keep myself busy because off button is a hard one for me. But I believe in the context of taking care of you, you have to have a strategy for every area of your life. Right. And so now I have a list of things I enjoy. I'm calling the roller rink to find out what time I can go skating. Literally. All
Okay.
of these different things, all of these different things that I can enjoy. But I also, like, we discussed before we got on, I also have relationships with massage. I also have relationships with travel. I also have relationships with making sure that I'm spending time with my husband. And so all of those elements have to take the same priority to help me keep the off button at bay, because if the off button is way on the other side of the room, I will keep myself busy. And so I have to be very intentional.
And I think people need that knowledge because they look at you and think, "Oh, it must be easier for her to do all these different things." And so you sharing that information, I think it will help someone. I know there's someone out there who is like, "Ooh, that really touched me and really helped me a lot."
Mhm.
I know the last point you have is holding fast to your faith. And one of the
Mhm.
questions I had, because I was thinking about this when I was reading the book, like I do believe in God. I should mention that
Mhm.
beforehand. I'm like, I do believe in God.
Mhm.
Believe in a lot of
Mhm.
things though. But I know there are people who struggle. And so, what advice do you have for those who don't have a strong faith in God or anything?
Mhm.
Right now, like how do they hold on to faith, which I know you describe as faith being confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what
Mhm.
we do not see. But like if they don't have that faith or a strong belief in anything, like how do they
Mhm.
go? Where do they go?
That's a tough one because I think about it often, especially because in my case, I rely on my faith heavily, right?
Mhm.
So here's what I would say. Here's the difference in me with and without, right? There was a time frame in my life where I was uncertain about so many things. I had despair as a normal pattern. I didn't have anything to cling on to that made me feel any more hopeful than what I already had, right? I
Mhm.
believe, and this is just me, that if you want to have security, you have to have something that you can cling to that is going to empower and enrich you, right? And
Mhm.
so if you're without that, you are likely, this is just me, in a perpetual state of despair. You are likely. in a perpetual state. And some days it rises up stronger than others. Some days you feel like you got this, and other days you have a lot of uncertainty. What faith means to me is that on the days when I am low, I can tap into something that enlightens and energizes me and gives me hope based on what
Mhm.
I believe it brings to the table, right? And so I would say to someone who is without a belief system, right? And without a belief system is different than not believing, right? Because
Correct.
not believing, you got some belief system, you just, are putting it on something that you've identified. But if you are without a belief system, I would say to you that you are forfeiting one of the rights that you have to feel better every single day about your
Mhm.
existence, about what is available for you, about the possibility of your life, about what you can rely on to help sustain and stabilize you, right? That's what
Yeah.
faith brings to me. And regardless of, to your earlier point, what you call it, I can show up and say, I know that's what it brings to the table for me. And if you choose to call on something else, then I hope that it brings that to the table for you. And if you're without it, then I will say to you, there is a gap in your ability to feel the security that comes from having a relationship. And I would say seek the relationship that gives you security about the things that you are uncertain about when it comes to your life. Not your existence,
Yeah.
your life. And there are a lot of different things out there, and I'm not here to kind of evaluate one versus the other, but I
Mhm.
do know that if you're going to invite yourself to believe in something that adds to you, that empowers you, that gives you hope, that gives you the ability to stand on it in times of despair, in days of contradiction, when uncertainty arises. And if that happens to be God, then that's great. But if that happens to be something else, I just want it to be strength for you because life is too tough without it.
No, I think that's powerful. And I think this book is really going to help so many people. And I love that in top of it, there's, prompts for you to kind of go on a 30-day journey to really embracing yourself. We never mentioned, when is the book being released
Yes,
and
I
where
am
can you
so
buy it?
excited. Yeah, the book is going to be available on Amazon starting on March 1st. And
Okay.
so I am so excited about the release. I actually believe that there are people who are going to end up doing more than they had ever imagined simply by taking the journey. Now, what's unique and different about the book, and I love that you brought it up, and if you don't mind, I'll just talk about it for just a second. What's unique and different is it really is two books in one. It is a book, but it is also a workbook, which means, to your point, the prompts are there to help you do reflection. As I started earlier on in our conversation talking about, reflection is where wisdom is found. When you look
Mhm.
back over, that's when you can find the wisdom. And so the way the book is designed is for 30 days. If you would dedicate 30 minutes for 30 days, then you can begin to shift your mindset and see change happening so that you can make forward motion with whatever you've been divinely inspired to accomplish. What I have found is that is exactly where we stall out. It's not like we're confused about what our assignment is, what our call is, what it is we're being inspired to do. We're pretty clear on that, right? People are
Yeah.
pretty clear. Where they stall out is in the go. And if we can get that thing in motion, there's something called momentum that'll help keep you going. And I know once my appetite changed and I found fulfillment in what I started to do, I hungered and thirst after that thing, right? After getting that
Mhm.
fulfillment more and more. And so if we can get you in motion and we can get momentum working with you, then fulfillment will kick in and you will continue to see that happen in your life. And so the way the book is constructed is it's a 30-day journey, as you mentioned. There's a reading that should take you no more than 15 or 20 minutes to read. And then there's the reflection that helps you to understand how to tap into the superpowers, how to set success goals for yourself, and then identify what can you get, embrace your power today, and go and do to accomplish your goal.
Great. I'll make sure to put the link for the book in. I just think that it will be so helpful to people. And I really appreciate you being on the show. And I'll make sure they also have links to just how to find you as well, because
Mhm.
you are making changes and you are helping people step one more step closer to realizing that they are complete just because they breathe. So I honor
Thank
and appreciate
you.
you for being here and the work that you are doing,
Thank
changing
you.
lives, because we need you.
Thank you. Thank
We
you.
need people like you.
Oh, that's so
So
sweet. I appreciate that.
definitely. And so at end of every show, I like to do some quick fire questions, nothing crazy or anything like that. So whatever comes to mind, quickly is whatever first thing comes to mind, just go for it. So the first question I always
Mhm.
ask people is, when did you know you were Black?
Oh, I knew I was Black when I was 6 years old, and my mom moved us to what was considered the white neighborhood. And there were no families that looked like us there. So
Mhm.
that was in 1976. And just walking through the neighborhood, and I remember the day that another Black family moved in, and fortunate for me, they had a little girl, so I had someone to play with.
Yeah.
And she and I are still friends till this day. But I think that was the first time that it was a stark reality for me that I was Black.
What does living hella well look like for you?
Well, to me, that's just all about showing up as the best version of me. And I am discovering that the best version of me at 20 is way then different than the one that was at 30, is way different than the one that was at 40, is way different than the one that's at 50, right? The best version of me has evolved over time, and I have fallen more in love with me um as the years have gone on, mainly because I'm getting to know more about the authentic me. And
Mhm.
so for me, it really is that pursuit of being as authentic with myself, to myself, as I possibly can.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you being on the show. Y'all go get that book, change your lives, and make sure you follow Denise. Other than that, I will see you
Oh,
guys the
thank
next
you.
week. See y'all later. Ciao. Thanks for joining us this week on the Hello Well with Danielle show. Make sure to visit our website, hellowellwithdanielle.com, where you can subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music and never miss an episode. Also, you can follow us on social media at Hello Well with Danielle on Facebook and Instagram, and Hello Well Danny on Twitter. And if you like hella love the show and got some good nuggets out of it, know that I'm not too proud to ask for you to please leave a rating or review on iTunes so that we can continue to expand our reach and help other women of color. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Ciao.